Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, a show that endeavors to bring you sort of highlights of some of the things going on locally, nationally, internationally. I'm Robin Adair, and we're trying always to bring, we think, a middle of the road approach. John Jurisic, my co-host with the most, and myself are just, we believe, average guys. We were both involved with the Chamber of Commerce. We've both been in business. We've both raised families. We're people that we think are pretty mainstream, and we try to hold mainstream views, although we're interested to hear what everybody has to say on so many different topics, including wokeism, which is going to be our flavor of the day, and social engineering. John.
Well, Robin, I'm so glad we're talking about this because I don't actually know what it means. It's bandied about all over the place, and folks are saying that they're not in favor, that they're in favor, that somehow woke culture is influencing policy. I looked up the latest definition of the woke ideal, and in fact, it's been defined in the Webster Dictionary. Here it says, to be woke, I suppose to be awake. Definition is aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice. When I look at that definition, Robin, it sounds to me just like someone actively involved in their community and in issues. Like, I don't know why it's separated out.
Well,
And
because
I
it's
look forward to
suggesting,
your
John, that suggesting that people haven't been awake, that the majority view has been closed to these things, and
Oh,
that really
really?
inspired people are waking up to them and are now feeling it's their job to wake the rest of us up as well.
Oh, well, then if that in fact is what it relates to, now I kind of get the then I can see that it would be somewhat annoying because in fact we've been doing this kind of stuff all of our lives, Robin. When we're at the chamber, we have been involved in issues. Some folks are saying wokeism is political correctism on steroids. Anyway, I'd love to hear your side of things.
Well, I think that there is merit on the surface to a lot of the woke issues. For example, First Nations. First Nations have been badly treated over the years by the predominant culture that came across from Europe, 300, 400 years ago. And we do need to repair that relationship. We need to make up for land being acquired and for culture being suppressed, and make the First Nations not only feel a part of the rest of the mainstream Canadian culture, but actually really honored by us. And I think we're working towards that slowly but surely. Now, the woke movement feels that we haven't really gone far enough. They, on their more extreme side, and I'm talking about the most extreme, are pulling down statues. They're defacing big monuments like Queen Victoria in front of our legislature, and they have got to the point where, because they're upset about residential schools, and that's something to be upset about, but the extreme have gone out to native reserves and actually burned down native churches, indigenous churches intended by indigenous communities, because they think the churches are guilty. And it's tends to be white activists that do this, with a sprinkling of First Nations consent. And it's wokeism, I believe, that has reached a bit of an extreme in that area. And it has also, in my opinion, reached an extreme around the environment, because we're all concerned about the environment, John. We all consider ourselves conscious of the fact that the planet needs to curtail the huge amount of pollution that's going up in the atmosphere and creating this carbon footprint. We need to clean up our water. We need to clean up our skies. We need to be better behaved in terms of looking after our planet for future generations. I think we're getting that message, but the woke are pushing it even further and further. And they're to the point where they're actually saying, well, you've got to stop doing this and you've got to stop doing that. And I think that we have to have a more open dialogue than the woke community perhaps is willing to have.
It does sound a lot like folks are frustrated with the results on some very big issues that are facing us. Did that not happen during the 60s? Absolutely, it did. Was that a woke culture at that time, trying to change cultural norms, etc.? So I'm not against. I'm not against what is happening. I am not against the way that we are all struggling with these issues. I don't entirely think it's something new. And my concern is that are we categorizing something so that we can easily criticize it? For example, the environment. We all of us now want to reduce air pollution, clean up the water, and live on a sustainable planet. Do we not all want to do that? I think we've all been struggling on how we do that. How do we do that? And there are clearly some folks, generally speaking, younger people, who think they have the solution and are forcing it upon us in a way that I'm not comfortable. I need to have more time. I need to understand it. I need more research. Now, if that means wokeism being forced upon us, I am against it. But I'm not entirely certain if it's a new term and it's a new way in which we deal with issues.
Fair enough, John. And definitions, of course, get used far and wide and can mean different things to different people. If you check out YouTube right now and go to the Oxford Union site, you can see this on YouTube. You can go to Twitter and see it. You can see regularly some of the best minds in the world tackling great, great issues in debate. And it's really exciting to see this. Now, very topically to this, a gentleman by the name of Konstantin Kisin, who is a podcaster and satirist. He is Russian and he is British. He is Russian and British. And he spoke at the Oxford Union, and his speech, which basically was challenging wokeism, has already gained over 50 million views and counting. We have an abbreviated version, so have a listen.
Now, I want to talk to those of you who are woke and who are open to rational argument. A small minority, I accept. Because one of the tenets of wokeness is, of course, that your feelings matter more than the truth. But I believe in you. I believe there are those of you here who are woke, who are open to rational argument. So let me make one. We are told that your generation cares more than any other about one issue in particular, and that issue is climate change. We're told that many of you suffer from climate anxiety. You wish to save the planet. And for tonight, and tonight only, I will join you. I will join you in worshipping at the feet of St. Greta of climate change. Let us all accept right here, right now, that we are living through a climate emergency and our stocks of polar bears are running extremely low. I join you in this view. I truly do. Now, what are we to do about this huge problem facing humanity? What can we in Britain do? We can only do one thing. You know why? This country is responsible for 2% of global carbon emissions, which means that if Britain was to sink into the sea right now, it would make absolutely no difference to the issue of climate change. You know why? Because the future of the climate is going to be decided in Asia and in Latin America by poor people who couldn't give a shit about saving the planet. 120 million people in China do not have enough food. I don't mean that they don't get dessert. I mean they suffer from malnutrition. That means that their immune system is breaking down because they don't have enough food. You're not going to get them to stay poor. You have clawed your way up the bloody and greasy pole of Chinese politics to be the undisputed supreme leader of the very Communist Party that destroyed your family. And you know that the main thing you have to do to survive and to stay in power is to deliver the one thing that the people of China want: prosperity, economic growth. Where do you think climate change ranks on Xi Jinping's list of priorities? A third of all children who live in extreme poverty in the world live in India. That means they are starving and dying of preventable disease. You are not going to get these people to stay poor. You're not even going to get them to not want to be richer. And so, I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, there is only one thing we can do in this country to stop climate change. And that is to make scientific and technological breakthroughs that will create the clean energy that is not only clean, but also cheap. And the only thing that wokeness has to offer in exchange is to brainwash bright young minds like you to believe that you are victims, to believe that you have no agency, to believe that what you must do to improve the world is to complain, is to protest, is to throw soup on paintings. And we on this side of the House are not on this side of the House because we do not wish to improve the world. We sit on this side of the House because we know that the way to improve the world is to work, is to create, it is to build. And the problem with woke culture is that it's trained too many young minds like yours to forget about that.
So, interesting to hear a perspective like that. And you don't have to go very far in British Columbia, and certainly in our community, to get a pretty clear example of how the woke crusading can unveil itself. And you don't have to look any further, in fact, than Victoria City Hall to see this type of thinking in action.
Yeah. Robin, as we chat through this, it's been very informative. Thank you. I'm sure our viewers are going to really benefit from this discussion on the Rumble Room. I often feel that these days that my opinion is being discounted. Somehow what I think is not relevant. And that, to me, it could also be categorized as ageism. You know, you're too old to know what's really important in the world. So all definitions aside, there is a disconnect between what some people think is right and how we solve those problems. And we're not talking together cooperatively. As you identified, there's something going on at City Hall that is in fact reflecting what we're talking about. There's a big push for missing middle housing and an equally strong shove and push for more bike lanes. And guess what? Fewer cars. Really? Have we thought this out? All in the name of a safe environment, Robin. Well, with this in mind, it's easy to understand why council has approved new developments with no parking on the property or on the street. I don't personally know how that would work out.
Well, we're going to find out because it has been approved and we're going to see it in action. And Councillor Matt Dell has been very strong on the issue of cycling lanes and very strong on the idea of using alternative types of transportation, share cars, traveling with motorized bicycles, all sorts of things, because he's very intent on us living a cleaner life. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is this really going to pass muster with the majority, the vast majority of people who live in the community? However, as he talks about the approval of this new housing where there is no parking, he lays out some of the things that he sees as benefits to the community and to the people in this residence. Near transit and bike trails, dedicated car share parking, abundant e-parking. Now, these people that are really intent on living this lifestyle tend to be a younger set, and they are idealistic. And if they can make it work, that's fine. I think it's worth taking a look at the model and see how it goes. My worry is this going to become some sort of a tipping point where there's going to be a lot of this type of housing, and it's going to go to a lot of neighborhoods, and there's going to be huge debates about people coming to visit and people coming to park, and cars needing to get in and out of areas where there isn't a lot of parking because there's a lot of these homes. And we just don't know how the neighborhoods are going to feel about all of this in the bigger picture. I guess we'll have to find out.
Robin, for those of us that know me, for my almost now 800,000 viewers that we have on Rumble Room, I have 4 kids. They're all in their 30s. And my youngest daughter uses a lot of the facilities and it incorporates a lot of the attitudes that Matt Dell has. Now, that's great. Here's the problem I have with this issue is that, in fact, our opinions of an older generation, Robin, aren't being respected. I have an e-bike. I can't buy groceries on my e-bike. I cannot and will not ride my e-bike in the rain or in the snow. I will not ride my e-bike if I'm tired. I will not ride my e-bike if I'm going to take my dog for a walk. Now, why can't we just respect the fact that we have different lifestyles and try to figure this all out? And in fact, a recent a council candidate and person who's been on the VRR several times, commentator Janice Williams, responded to this new kind of development incorporating all of these issues, this wokeism, by tweeting, "Parked cars generally aren't a problem. A parked car does not cause congestion. Yet we are wanting to ensure people cannot park cars under the mistaken belief that being unable to park them will mean they won't exist." Good point, Janice. Well said. Big Brother cannot tell people that they can't own a car. I totally agree. And Big Brother cannot tell people they must give up their cars for bikes and buses. Don't tell us that.
I couldn't agree more with that, John. Obviously, you and I are on the same page. We're of a certain age. We recognize there's another generation that maybe feels differently about this. And idealism is the purview often of the young. And we talked about the 60s and the 70s when there was a lot of activism, and that was a different type around different issues. I think it's all part of our culture. It's no disrespect to Matt Dell. I think Matt Dell is a very principled guy, and he has a young family, and he wants to build a good future for them. So we'll just have to wait and see how this goes. I just think what we are doing is retooling our entire community for, at this point, a very small minority. And I'm concerned about that. So we'll just see how that goes. We decided to turn to someone who's very familiar with this whole missing middle question and ask about, what are we going to do about all these thousands and thousands of people that are coming to British Columbia and then coming to Vancouver Island, and they want to live here, and it's expensive, and it's getting more and more difficult to find spots to live. And so we talked to Casey Edge, who is the executive director of the Victoria Residential Builders Association. Let's zoom him in.
Well, joining us now is Casey Edge. Always great to have you in the Rumble Room, Casey.
Pleasure to be here, John and Robin.
Missing middle. It's a call to speed up approval processes, cut out red tape, build duplexes, fourplexes, townhouses, apartment buildings among single-family home neighborhoods. Okay, so actually, is anyone going to do this? Like, there's so much stuff coming from the provincial government, municipal government. I don't even know what missing middle is. So give a sense, is there anyone in 2023 that's going to provide leadership towards meeting these goals?
Well, so it's a mistake to think that politicians are leaders. They're not. They're followers. They follow the voters, the public. So really the key is to educate the voters with respect to the issues. So who educates the voters? The media, you guys. And really, once the public, the voters, understand what the issues are, the challenges, the obstacles with respect to what the politicians are creating, and they start making the politicians read or watch your podcast, they go, oh, well, we better get on board with this because, people are getting unhappy with the spin isn't working from the government side. So what happened is the government started changing its tune federally and provincially. Oh, yeah, we have a supply shortage. Oh, yes, we have record immigration. So yeah, we have a supply shortage. But they were not prepared to really admit that until the media was started writing about it, presenting it, and then the public, the voters said, well, we're not buying more taxes because it's not working. In fact, housing prices are continuing to climb under your formula of more taxes will create affordability.
It's really interesting that you should be putting it this way, because I think we have been told for quite some time that this is being managed in that way, and somehow this is mediating the price of a home, and yet we see the home prices that keep going up. And I'm also curious, Casey, for your perspective on quality of life issues which are coming up. I mean, people are drawn to come to places like British Columbia in general. They love to come to Vancouver. They love to come to Victoria for the climate and all the wonderful services and beautiful neighborhoods that we have here. And so because of this huge number of people coming, there's huge pressure on the market. And a lot of people want a home, and there's only a finite number of places to live. And yet there is this push for the missing middle in basically, leafy neighborhoods, and there's a pushback, and it's not necessarily always from people you might think, like Steve Orchardon, the former NDP MLA, has been very strong in his opposition to a blanket missing middle, because he says a lot of very nice little neighborhoods in areas like Oaklands and other parts of Victoria that are traditional lower expense homes will be put under tremendous pressure and forever changed. And I think there's a resistance to forever changing everything that we've always held dear about our community. How does your organization view all of that?
Well, we do our research, and basically there was zero missing middle, meaning townhomes, duplexes, more affordable housing, and relative to the market. For young families are seeking that kind of product. Most of that product is built out in Langford. Zero missing middle housing built in 6 municipalities in the CRD. So those 6 municipalities in 2022, zero. Central Saanich, Oak Bay, North Saanich, Metchosin, and Highlands. Now you say, well, is there room and all the rest? Well, go to the BC Assessment Authority. There's a myth that houses are unaffordable. BC's older homes are affordable, but the land they are sitting on is not. So in July 2022, a 1950s home on a 14,842 square foot lot in Saanich was assessed at $1,033,000 by the BC Assessment Authority. The building was $114,000 and the lot was $919,000. That land could accommodate several single-family homes or multiple townhomes. More than 100 years ago, this is part of my presentation, homes in James Bay were built on 2,500 square foot lots, creating historically significant walkable community. So when people talk about, well, we've got to preserve this or that or the other thing, what's wrong with James Bay? James Bay is a very pleasant, historically significant community. We have 14,000 square foot lots and even larger lots out in 20,000 square feet up in Saanich Peninsula that could easily accommodate missing middle housing, but somehow that's not suitable for the community. It makes no sense, and makes no sense in terms of the numbers or historically. It's nonsense.
That's compelling stuff, Casey. Wow. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and move into an area that I'm currently involved with. So anecdotally and personally, I've noticed a lot of Spanish and foreign voices on local construction sites, which clearly means out of town, potentially Mexican, South American temporary workers are making a difference and helping local construction companies. Is this enough to meet the demand of builders and businesses? Staff shortages continue to plague our business sector. Doesn't seem to be an easy solution to solve this crisis. What do you think needs to happen around staff shortages now and for the foreseeable future, Casey?
Well, we did do a presentation at our Builders Council, which you attended as well, John, and the immigration recruitment company, IMM Recruitment. And so, yes, builders are looking at those kinds of opportunities to bring in skilled trades. But actually, we have and we've advocated this for a number of years, what should be a fairly obvious solution to the skilled trades shortage. Enable university students, arts, sciences, whatever, to take electives in carpentry. They can still get their university degree. You have thousands and thousands and let's face it, the parents and the high schools are encouraging kids to go to university. That's fine. But why do we have these two silos, trade schools and universities? Let's amalgamate the two a little bit. Doesn't have to change their mandatory studies. Enable them to take an elective in carpentry, and that will provide them with a skill as soon as they get out of university. And who knows, maybe they'll enjoy the work and continue in that environment.
You know, I want to end with this thought, and it's more around transportation, I guess, but it's also around missing middle. There are now builders out there advertising projects where you can buy a home that has no parking, has no facility for parking, and they don't even have room for parking on the street. And they're saying, wow, we have great access for bicycles, there's public transit nearby, and we'd like to sell it to you like that. This is something that's being promoted in some circles. And we have all this massive development taking place in the Songhees, down in Village Green, and yet we have very, very narrow roads. And we seem to have narrower roads all the time because of bike lanes. And we don't seem to also have the services in a lot of these areas you'd expect for bringing in all these people. You'd think there'd be commensurately more banks, more services, more drugstores, all these things. Do you not think that there needs to be more planning in advance? Or are you concerned that sometimes it's the cart before the horse on some of these projects where people, if they're going to pay that kind of money to live here, you'd think they'd want the services that go along with a beautiful home?
Not sometimes, Robin, all the time. The reality is there's no responsible regional planning in the CRD. The CRD, we have 13 official community plans. How can you expect to get appropriate regional planning for housing, transportation, infrastructure in an environment like that? Well, we should have started the LRT long ago. And that's something that we've advocated for a long time. And that will tell you where to put the housing. And, you know, instead the BC government, rather than investing in LRT, which gets rid of the commute, greenhouse gases from the commute and all the rest of it, they would rather subsidize electric vehicles, costly electric vehicles for thousands of dollars per vehicle, rather than build an LRT.
You know, not long ago, the Victoria Real Estate Board, the BC Real Estate Association, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corp, and yourselves held their annual crystal ball housing forecast. In a nutshell, because I'm quite sure that took a bit of time, what did you see as the forecast highlights, please, for 2023? Who are the winners and losers for the coming year?
Well, I think overall, we all agreed that there'll be a more stable environment for inflation and interest rates, resulting in more consumer confidence in 2023. It's anticipated there'll be perhaps another 0.25% increase in mortgage rates, but then inflation is expected to stabilize. And the consumers, what they're looking for is a stable rate environment. We've been on a bit of a roller coaster ride in 2022.
That's interesting that you should be saying that. I think there's a speculation out there, not a bad way to describe it, from a lot of people that the prices are going to come down because the interest rates have gone up. And I'm thinking from a builder's perspective. I mean, we keep hearing about the supply chain issues, tough to get materials sometime for some of these projects that are going forward, and the interest rates going up, which puts pressure on some of these builders that have already got their plows in the ground and have got their buildings going, and they need to sell at a certain rate to make their profit. How is this balancing out? Are there people that are going to still be paying a price, I guess, for the fact that the interest rates have shifted?
Yes. So the reason we have significant new housing last year is because a lot of the pre-sales took place in the spring. And that's actually what has been driving construction. You have to have those pre-sales. So what's anticipated moving forward, though, is likely pulling back on some new construction, specifically single-family homes, spec homes, that product will likely take a hit in terms of, and as you pointed out, Robin, the supply chain issues still exist. Fiberglass insulation, the containers went from $5,000 over the pandemic, went from $5,000 to $20,000 per container. Now they've come down, but not to the $5,000 mark.
Always great to hear from Casey Edge. He never holds back, gives us lots of interesting opinions and lots of food for thought. And just to mention again, we'd be very happy to have Matt Dell come on the Victoria Rumble Room and fully explain what's going on with this policy with homes with no parking. We just think this is an interesting question. And Matt, the welcome wagon is out. If you want to come on the show, we're happy to give you some airtime. And on that happy note, John, it's time to wrap things up.
Great program, great discussion. Casey really provoked many fascinating thoughts around missing middle and where we're going with all this stuff. And at the end of it, it's so much fun. I love doing this with you. And if you all want to tune into the Rumble Room on a regular basis, you know that our Facebook page is sort of the heart. It's the heart of the Rumble Room. And then the cousins are our Twitter page. Our YouTube page houses all of our stuff. And of course, we have a variety of groups that we'll try to identify for you more on Facebook, as we also have Instagram and TikTok. And so for now, I am your wide awake Croatian sensation, Johnny Juris.
And I am not woke, but I am awake. I'm Robin Adair, and rumble on.